Hey everyone, Mark here from TST Industries reporting live from Jennings GP here in sunny Florida. And today we are testing out the all-new 2024 Kawasaki Ninja 500, where Bart will be giving it a full track breakdown. It is in a completely stock form with stock tires, stock suspension. In fact, the only thing we've really done is remove the mirrors. So we are going to give you as true of a first ride impression on the track to see just how well this bike stacks up. Also remembering we have raced the Ninja 400, so we're very excited. We hope you guys stick around. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Bart's gonna be taking this bike out, turning some laps along with Alex. They'll be rotating, both giving their input on the machine, and we hope you guys enjoy. Let's go.
All right, you guys, we are back from Jennings GP. We took this little beast to the track. We ripped a bunch of laps so I could get a couple of thoughts together and share with you my impressions of this bike. Now, I want you to keep in mind several things. First of all, this is a bone stock bike. It is as delivered by Kawasaki from the showroom floor to our building, then off to the track. We even had the stock fender on this thing when we were running it around Jennings. So make sure that you understand that those impressions were formed with a bone stock bike. Second of all, I'm gonna try to keep this as objective as possible, but I am a person that has a certain kind of experience in motorcycle riding, and all of these impressions that I'm gonna share with you are from my perspective. So there will be some subjective matter that we will discuss, and then you guys can chime in the comments down below and let me know what you thought of my thoughts and points. All right, I'm gonna use this thing today so that I can keep my thoughts organized and not jump around. Let's go with brakes first. That is a very important system to me. It is my safety device. It is what keeps me safe and not flying off corners, hitting trees, and I have to say, I'm pretty disappointed on this bike. Now, this is an ABS model, and ABS models are inherently plagued with numb brakes when it comes to track riding. This is a track review. So if you want street review, Mark already did that. Check that out on our YouTube channel. Back to brakes. My hand does not fit on this lever very well. If I try to use one finger or two finger braking, I'm right up against my knuckles. So I had to gas with a full hand, take my fingers off and brake with a full hand. That for me is a pretty big miss, but again, I have pretty giant mitts. Maybe smaller hand riders can still take advantage of this lever, but for myself, I would expect a sport bike to have an adjustable lever on the brakes. It's a little bit of a miss, not a big deal. We do have Wilmot Tech Evos levers that will replace these down the line, so that's not a big deal. Like I said though, ABS for street use, probably a good idea. For track use, there is a big disconnect. There's a massive amount of line, including rubber line that does expand with the work being applied to the master cylinder. There's extra fluid in all those lines, and then it's coupled to your caliper clamping onto the rotor. That is just a lot of stuff to happen in between what you need and what you get. I like a more direct approach. This is an ABS model. We were not able to procure a standard model, so I'm just saying it how I felt it. I believe the standard model will respond a little bit better. However, the standard models still use rubber hoses as the transmission of work from the master cylinder to the pistons in the calipers. So there is still a little bit of waste of that work in the expansion of the lines. That's why we always go with our Coromoto trusted lines that are braided, steel braided lines, and they transmit all of the power from the master cylinder to the front brake, and likewise in the rear. Now, the numb feeling most likely came from the ABS, so we will do subsequent testing later down the line when we convert this thing to more of a track machine. We'll probably hop back on video and let you guys know what that felt like after that, but there's not much we can do about that numb feeling. Maybe we could just add our nice Evos levers to the front here and get a better response just from a nicer performance against the hand. One more thing I want to add about the brakes. Under braking, when you try to change direction, there was quite a bit of fight back from the front brakes. Now, I do believe that that is partially due to the geometry of this bike. We didn't touch the geometry, partially due to the suspension components, and then some due to that rigid front rotor that's on this bike. Again, that's not something that a lot of people will notice. If you're doing some high performance riding, turning into corners, turning all the way and braking all the way into the apex, you will feel that resistance to turn. Or I even noticed when I needed to increase the braking towards the apex, it would progressively want to stand me back up. That's pretty prevalent on most stock machines. This one felt extra harsh. All right, let's move on from brakes. Ergonomics is the next big thing for me. Obviously, everybody wants to know how the power felt, but without good ergonomics, you can't apply that power. So brakes first, ergonomics second, then suspension. Let's talk about how I felt in this thing. The bars are way high. It's very Harley-esque. I think this bike is built somewhere in between comfort and peppy riding. High performance sport riding is not really baked in, although you can do it. I certainly had a lot of fun and I felt challenged riding this bike around the track, but what would have helped me was these bars being way lower and a little bit farther out, a little bit better application of my steering inputs, and also the rider triangle here is very low. I feel very cramped in there and slammed towards the front. I like to be up higher and I like to be able to push myself towards the rear. This was not possible on this bike. It sort of had this like saddle feel where I just sunk into one place, and like if I tried to push myself back, I would sink right back in. So I was kind of settled in there. I just had to make it work. Still a lot of fun, still a lot of smiles doing all those laps, but it would have been a lot more fun had I been able to put my butt where I want to and shift my weight to where I want to. One thing I have to comment that was a very big positive was the ground clearance. On this particular bike, I was able to get it over quite far and no marks on the feelers. Well, maybe there's a couple scrapes here and there. That was probably from hitting bumps in the corners. Under normal cornering forces, where I was just sweeping through, I had no issues with ground clearance on this bike, even though it's not raised yet. We haven't done anything to modify that. It's just good right from the factory. Now let's quickly discuss the tires of choice on this bike. The bike comes equipped right from the showroom floor with Dunlop Sportmax GPR 300s. I've used these on other small bikes, never had any complaints. I think this was the one bike that I pushed the farthest as far as pace goes on these tires. And I have to say, they didn't disappoint. I got them to squirm and move a little bit here and there, but again, I wasn't really pushing it that far. This was the first day out on this bike. I was just getting adjusted. I wasn't too comfortable with the ergo, so I wasn't going for lap times, but I was deep in corners. I was really testing how far I could drag the brakes into corners and things like that. And I gotta say, like, it didn't really move around on me too much. It didn't break loose. I felt it kind of squirm out of corners a couple of times when I gave it full snot straight out of the apex. But it's the same thing when we're going higher pace on race tires. So not a big deal for me there. I was pleasantly surprised and I was pretty amused. Gave me a big old smile knowing that these tires that just come right on the bikes, right out of the showroom floor, are pretty good nowadays. All right, this is my favorite subject always, suspension. there are so many counterpoints to what I can say based on who's riding the bike, but these are my impressions. I felt like I was riding a pogo stick. This is actually pretty normal for these small bikes. Once you see where the bar is on a bike like this and how the cockpit is configured, you know you're getting a commuter bike. Now, this is a sport-inspired bike. It is a Ninja lineage bike, but the factory had to configure it to enable a broad spectrum of type of rider to be able to ride it on streets in Europe, on cobblestone, in the United States, over crazy potholes, and everywhere in between all around the world. Sometimes with a pylon rider. So they're trying to hit a moving target, and they just need to make it safe. It is up to companies like us, aftermarket companies, to equip these bikes with proper suspension for track riding, if that kind of riding is going to be done. So what we feel on the track with these pogo sticks is, again, very subjective, but I gotta say, the rebound performance on the front forks is like the most horrendous thing that you notice immediately. Now, this is not a slam on Kawasaki, because this is, like I said, it has to be safe for the rider that it's intended for. But when you go to the track and you start really ripping it around the track, every time you start trailing off the brakes, you have to be so careful to not upset the chassis by the rebound when you release the front brakes. Now, over the whole day of riding this thing around Jennings, I was able to sort of feel like a happy medium where I was able to unload the front with a very slow release of the brakes. But that really cut into how I ride at that track with bikes that are better equipped with better suspension. Not too big of a deal, I think. We sell Andriani cartridges for the front of this bike that are very inexpensive. That's what we mount in all our bikes. That's going to be a very simple fix to this problem. But for now, that's what I felt from the front here. The chassis itself was quite a bit easy to upset, especially noticing that on side-to-side changes in corners that were successive, one after another. There's a 3-pack of corners at Jennings, 7, 8, 9. That right there was very evident that this bike wants to wallow, and there's not enough adjustment in the suspension to take that out, even somewhat. I was able to go up all the way on the preload in the rear, and that took up some of that springiness. Still, this bike likes to move around a lot, and in the future, for proper riding around a track at proper upper pace, we will need to do something about that suspension. Now we're going to get into what I believe is the meat of what everybody's really looking for in this video, and that's the power and torque delivery and how that's harnessed to the transmission. Now, this is still a small bike. Kawasaki called it a 500 for some reason. It really is a 451cc bike. It's very reminiscent of the Ninja 400. Now, when you take it to the dyno and you spit out some graphs from running it on the dyno, you will notice a pretty significant difference from the 400, and we will illustrate that in the dyno video that we'll be releasing really soon. We already capture all the data, so come back to our YouTube channel and check us out in about a week and a half. We'll have that video for you. We'll go over all those nuances there. This bike does feel quite a bit more peppy, especially in the lower RPM range. What that causes is really nice drive out of corners. So you stuff yourself into a corner, you come off those brakes, and you want to get that power back up. It goes up to RPMs much quicker. Now, it really does die off up at the top, kind of like the Ninja 400 did. So it's very similar in that to the previous model. It is essentially the same motor with a slightly larger capacity, so it'll act very similar. We don't know about the cam timing just yet. We haven't gotten in that far into the motor, but it is possible that it's really just the extra CCs that are causing this. The power, the torque is shifted lower, the power is shifted a little bit lower. It peaks out a little bit lower than in the 400. But as far as how it feels riding it, I feel that it's a little bit more usable than the 400 was. And I think with a few bolt-ons like our airbox, our TST Industries Works airbox, an exhaust or tune, this thing will get that fall off at the end of the RPM range right back up and just keep on climbing, and this thing will be a monster at the track. So even though the power is really not that much higher at the peak from the Ninja 400. Once you look at the curves from the dynograph, you'll notice that the entire curve is shifted up quite a bit. So you have a lot more usable meat for the entire RPM range. This bike is quite a bit nicer than the 400, I have to say. It looks nicer, I think. And also, it feels a lot nicer, really just ripping it around the track in every place. Up at the top, it feels pretty much the same, but getting to the top, you'll get there faster, you'll accelerate faster, you'll rip through the gears a lot faster, and that'll probably yield in a lot more smiles, like it did for me. I gotta say, ripping this thing around the track, felt really smooth. The power delivery, the actual application of power and how it increases is very, very smooth. The down-low performance of partial throttle opening is very crisp, although this particular bike, I don't know if that's prevalent across the whole line. All the models delivered, there is quite a bit of slack here, and that can be taken up by manual adjustment. But again, I'm talking about this bike as it was delivered. That is one of those things, before going to the track next time, I would definitely adjust that. So, partial throttle, very nice opening, very nice, crisp, smooth throttle. And then as you go up, 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 even if you slam it open, it's still very, very crisp and very smooth. There are no kinks, there's no flat spots. It feels very well developed. The one thing that I noticed that was kind of it requires a very long throw. So for myself, when I'm tucked in and really, really tight, it's not natural to go that far with my wrist. I had to go down and then my elbow had to come out every time. So I'm one of those people that would really benefit from a short throw throttle. That's what we usually do on our race bikes here anyway, but I think with the slack taken up, this will be a little bit nicer, and then we will continue developing it to feel even better with aftermarket parts. Let's talk about transmission. Like I said, this is a very similar bike to the 400, so I felt like the transmission was either the same or maybe had slightly different ratios. It's tough to tell because the final ratio is a little bit different than on the 400, but overall, I had no issues with the way the bike was geared. First and second gear could have been a little bit taller. I felt like they were a little bit short, but I only used them a little bit here and there. I'm just thinking about, in the future, launching this bike from a dead stop into a race. It could probably use a slightly longer first and second gear just to make it better for that third engagement and fourth. One other thing that I noticed that is a big, big downfall of these transmissions and some of the other smaller bike transmissions, they do tend to pop out of gear on their own. Now, some people will say, oh, it's a lazy shift, or you're keeping your foot next to the shifter. No, that's not the case. We've been racing these bikes for many, many years, these and other bikes, big bikes, small bikes, whatever it is. These bikes do have very inexpensively made gears. They are forged and not really machined. So typically what we do is take these things out, take off all of the gears, put them into a mill, cut them on an angle so that the dogs engage on angles and they will never pop out on their own. As delivered, these things do pop out. I had it pop out of 6th into 5th, 5th into 4th, and then Alex, who was also riding this bike for several laps, he had 2 pop-outs as well. And that's only one day. And that's without any additional power built into the bike with aftermarket components. So as I see it, this will happen more and more as we progress with adding extra performance into the bike. So it will be necessary for us at least to take out this transmission and get it back cut so that we can get it silky smooth and not popping out. One more thing before we close out, I'm a very big proponent of GP shift, which is first gear is up and the rest are down. It really helps in shifting right through corners. So I really decided I should do that to this bike, and that was very simple to do. I just switched it around. It required a small modification to the countershaft sprocket cover. I was able to do it right in the pits. So that's pretty much it for what I had to say about this bike. I'll add one more thing. This is a commuter bike. It does, however, present the ability to go to the track and put on a big old smile as long as you're willing to adapt to what it offers. I ran around the track for a whole day. I had a big old smile on my face. I came back super happy. I was able to challenge myself even on this little bike. So I think you will find this bike very, very pleasing to ride at the track, and it'll give you a nice platform to upgrade from and have a lot of fun. And I know that some race organizations already homologated it for some of the race circuits, and more will come on board, I'm sure. So rest assured, if you grab one of these, you will have a lot of fun riding it. And that's pretty much it for me. I'm gonna sign off now. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in what Mark found riding this thing around the streets, that video is already live on our YouTube channel. Check out our parts at tstindustries.com. We have a whole catalog of parts growing for this bike and other bikes you may have in your stable. Whew, that was a lot of words. Thanks for watching, guys. Ride safe. See you later.